So
Yeah.
I'm not ashamed of how she died. And
Yeah.
I think early on, I was a little afraid when people would say, "Oh, your mom died." And I was, was she sick? Yeah. And I didn't really know how to explain, like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, she was sick, but it was also from like trauma, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
cancer. It was a different kind of cancer, right? It
Yeah.
was the world hurt her in many ways. And she
Yeah.
had, you know, so much from that. And then like the world wasn't safe enough
Yeah.
to stay. So I've definitely worked through not hiding that. Like she died by suicide, and that's not a shameful thing. And she fought
Yeah.
very hard, and I don't view it as selfish. So I appreciate you kind of
Yeah.
setting it up to where we can share like that. Cause yeah, for a long time, I was very defensive and very protective over that. I was always gearing up for someone to say, like, oh, well, that's not the same. I lost someone, and they wanted to be here. And I'm like, well, my mom wanted to be here too, so much. And we know that, with suicide loss, they don't, that's against everything. We're wired. We're not wired
Yeah.
to want to die. That's not even
Yes.
what it wasn't about death. It was just wanting the pain to be done.
Yeah. Hello, my grieving friend. It's Lisa. Whether you're a longtime listener or you're tuning in for the first time, welcome to Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast. I'm so glad you're here. By now, you likely know I'm passionate about exploring the nature of grief. As a narrative therapy trained social worker, a grief activist, and a widow, I'm dedicated to helping us learn to be in relationship with our grief instead of running from it. In our modern culture, we've pushed grieving into the shadows, something to be experienced privately, causing us to suffer unnecessarily and in isolation. Grief is our human inheritance. It offers us medicine if we tend to it as a community. So, together with my extraordinary guests, and this season answering your questions too, we're changing the narratives of grief, one conversation at a time. Sara Rian is a poet, self published author, mother, wife, licensed therapist, and griever living in my home state of Michigan. She's in Metro Detroit. She has been drawn to grief poetry ever since her mother died in 2018. As a mental health professional, suicide loss survivor, and, well, grieving human, Sarah shares her work with others to let them know that they are not alone in their love or their grief. In our conversation today, Sarah is honest, courageous, vulnerable, and insightful as we explored the both and of living her life with a mother who struggled with suicidality. She offers deep compassion for her mother's choice to end her life, the complexity of being a clinician who also works with people experiencing thoughts of suicide. And she shares how and what she did to metabolize her mother's death. She explains what allows her to be present and love authentically, not out of a place from fear, but because of the preciousness of this life. You are going to love her and this conversation. Sara Rian, welcome to Grief is a Sneaky Bitch podcast. I'm really so delighted to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am very excited. I am so excited to chat.
Yeah. Well, listeners heard at the top of the show a little bit about your bio, about the fact that you're coming to the world of grief as a professional, but also having personally experienced grief as a poet, as a writer, as a human, as we all are coming to this space of grief. So we're going to dive into all of those topics, including the unique grief that comes in the wake of suicide loss. But I want to ground us in the conversation where I start every conversation, and that's helping us to unpack um, where we all collect our grief beliefs from. And the best way, in my estimation, to get at that over these past 7 seasons is to invite each of my guests to think back to an early memory of loss. Could be in your childhood, could be death loss or some other kind of loss. And how were the adults in your life modeling grief? What were the
Um,
explicit or implicit messages that you were getting about what grief, should look like? And now as this version of you, how does that square with what you know to be grief? So, can you think of an early memory of loss, and what did the culture around that loss look like in your family?
Yes, gosh, that's such a great question. The first thing I thought of, it was actually pet loss, I think
Yeah,
was really, I know that's probably pretty common when talking about childhood. Um, I had so many pets had died when I was little just because my mom was such an animal lover. We had a lot
yeah,
of them, so there was a lot more chances that we were going to
yeah,
lose some to
yeah.
different circumstances. But I was thinking about one of our Pomeranians that we had, one of our dogs. This was probably in early middle school. So I know I had experienced pet loss before that, but I remember this one, he had been hit by a car
Mm,
and I was not there. I didn't witness it or anything, thank God, because I wouldn't have been able to handle it at all. But it was very like I was like wrecked. I was
yeah,
absolutely devastated. I knew I was a deep griever and I was not great with death early on.
yeah.
And I remember just like weeks of writing about it, like writing about his loss. His name was Sebastian. Um, Writing about his loss and just like really not able to let it didn't really move through me, I feel like, as quickly as it moved through everyone else.
Mm,
But everyone around me was understanding. My mom was an animal lover and she was very supportive. And even though her grief didn't look as deep as mine for as long, she was still just very sad and traumatized by the whole thing. And I feel like she was supporting my process, even though mine was a little bit deeper and a little bit more intense than probably like my siblings or other people in the family.
yeah.
Um, I do know I had a family member who, like, joked about it, and,
Mm,
I had my dog's ashes, and he had put, like, a little I don't think he meant it to be harmful by any means, but he put, like, a joking, like a headstone made out of cardboard on top of the ashes and said, "Should have looked both ways," as, like, the
oh,
little inscription on it, and I
yeah,
remember being like, everyone else kinda, like, laughed and thought that was, like, silly, and I remember just, like, being, like, shattered by that,
yeah,
and I, like, couldn't understand how it could be, like, a joke, so I think I was just very sensitive to it, and
yeah,
no one was telling me to quiet it or anything like that, but I always know like, I knew mine looked different. I just knew I was not good at things dying,
yeah,
very early on.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, we certainly have had stories of pet loss on the show. And I think there's two things I want to reflect back to you and to our listeners too about that. One is pet loss is valid and real, and it gets disenfranchised so often, and our pets are our companions. And so I never tire of hearing it be a part of this answer to this question because I think we need to normalize the fact that it's a valid, this is an important relationship in our life and it's valid to grieve. Um, and then the other thing I just want to name, this is like the little narrative therapist in me, narrative therapy trained social worker in me, which, as you said, you said a couple times some version of I knew from a young age I wasn't good with death, and I think I would just invite a reframe, which was like, I think you knew from an early age that you felt death very deeply. And I
Mm.
just do that
Yes.
reframe for all of us because I do think part of why I get at this question of like, where do our earliest grief beliefs comes from is we're all taught, we all sort of inculcate this belief that there's a good way and a bad way, and that a good way to be with something is to be not emotional, to not have it last long, to not feel deeply. And I know that's not what you meant at your present. I mean, you're a therapist now. I know you didn't mean that now, but
Yeah.
just wanted to name that, like, yeah, what's coming up for you as I say that.
No, that's amazing, and it's so true, and I actually, like, just wrote a poem about this because I know there's no being good, there's no being bad, but it does feel, sometimes, and I think in our online and in our community, in the lost community, there's doulas and there's death workers and there's people who are speaking about death so beautifully in a way and as this natural thing and this release and an energy exchange, and they still exist, and I have struggled with it. I
Yeah.
look at them and I'm like, I'm so jealous that people see death like that. But I think you're right, that reframe, like, it has hit me deeply.
Yeah.
That the physical body is no longer here. I have felt that so deeply, as much as I have worked to find beauty in death in other ways. And it's natural, and I want to normalize death and talking about death. And it's this thing we're all going to experience. But losing something to death has always just,
Yes.
it's rocked me good. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just
Yeah.
truly, that transition is, it looks different for
Intense.
everyone,
Yes.
and yes, it has
Yeah.
definitely landed with me different for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I so appreciate you talking about that. For those who are listening, you referenced death doulas, and if you're a longtime listener of the show, I've had palliative and hospice social workers and doctors and death doulas, including Alua Arthur and others, Jamie Thrower, others on the show. And yes, they do, like I do sometimes, and I think in some ways you do in your writing and your poetry, speak with such beauty about death, about being present, about the sacredness of that threshold. I've used that word on this show before. I think earlier this season in my conversation with Saad Simone about the sacredness of, I was with both my husband and my friend Joe when they died. And I've said things like it's the most sacred and devastating experiences that I would have. And even those people who can speak so eloquently about it, when it's their moment, when they're with their person, I believe we are all rocked to our core. So I
Yes.
guess I'm just sort of naming, like, I think there can be the beauty and the wisdom and the lessons that you learn, and certain people can learn to be more comfortable with or find the kind of beauty and sacredness in it. And and you have a poem that sort of alludes to this I want to get to later. We can't know, meaning with our brain, we can't know our way out of the pain.
Absolutely.
We
Absolutely.
cannot. I think I joked somewhere in my book. I said, I wish you could intellectualize or think your way out of grief, because believe me, if you could have, I would have, and I would have told you the
Yeah.
secret, you know, but you
Absolutely.
can't,
With my overthinking,
right?
100%, I would have been there, baby.
I would have
100%.
offered it to you, but you can't. And of course, I could get into a
Yeah.
lot of reasons why that's a good thing, because we need to feel it and all the things.
Yes.
Um, but
Yes.
so, you're coming, as I said today, you're coming as a poet, as an author, you're a mom, you're a wife, you're a therapist. You're also somebody who's grieved suicide loss and the death of your mother. I want to get to all of those stories, but when you think about sort of the through line of how you're showing up today in those different roles, wife, therapist, even grieving daughter, those things, poet,
Yes.
what are the lessons or themes or threads that you see that ties all of those things together that you're showing up with today? Or how does it show up, for instance, maybe in the work that you do?
Yes. I mean, every one of those things that if someone says, like, "Who are you?" and all these
Yeah.
identities I hand, they're all just like,
It's
it's
all a
just
story we
love,
can weave
right?
together.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. It's never something, I think in college they said, like, what would you want someone to say at your funeral? And people will say, like, here are the things I did, here are the things I am, you'll name
Yes.
identities. And mine are always these identities that are connected to others. They're very like relational. Everything I
Okay.
do is like, it's very like love based, right? I'm a mom, and all these things are like, these are who am I in relation to others, and not in a bad way. I'm just a very relational person. That is why
Yeah.
I went into marriage and family therapy. That's why, with my
Yes.
clients, right? Everything I feel like I'm shaped by my relationships, and I always have been. That's the lens I use even in my clinical world. So yeah, there's just this connection with living beings, even in my poetry. I guess connection with non-living beings too, because that's the
Yeah.
most connection I have with my mom and my grandma and my niece and anyone who's passed. So it's just connection. Everything that I identify as when people say, "Who are you?" It's always
Yeah.
just, here's how I connect with others, and here's the different hats I wear while
Yeah.
connecting with others in different capacities. So, yeah, it's very
That's
just, they're all very relational.
yeah. Well, I love that answer too. First, that's how you see yourself and your connection to identity. And I would say that there's a wisdom to that to all of us listening. For those of you who aren't, maybe that's not your first identity story, that your identity stories are maybe more about, to your point, what you do or what you've accomplished, is that we are relational beings, period, whether you identify it or not, and why grief hits so hard. It's not just the death of that person, but we've constructed who we are, our identity story in relationship. You maybe experience this personally or professionally. I'm curious, but I think a lot of the work I've done with people who've, for instance, experienced um, like both parents dying within a short period of time. It seemed like I was seeing a lot of clients who had who were going through that. And then sort of there was the grief of the death of them, of course. And then there was the grief of the death of the identity. Like, if my mom and dad aren't alive, am I a daughter anymore?
Yes. Oh my
Like,
gosh,
who
yes.
am I? I mean, I felt this when my husband died. It's like, I'm not a wife. Am I a wife anymore? So
Yes.
when you think about, and wherever you want to go, if it's, you want to dive into your personal story about the death of your mom, or even just start with maybe how you see this clinically, but just naming the sort of the losses we experience, not just of the person, but in the construction of our own sense of self.
Absolutely. Yes, the very things that created these identities for me, we can lose those physically, right? Like
Yes.
I talk about myself as a daughter, I talk about and to lose my mom's physical body here, and my dad is still alive, but that was like, wait, so am
Yeah.
you'll hear motherless daughter or
Yeah.
daughters without moms. I'm like, wait, but I still have a mom. She's
Yeah.
not alive, but like that I struggle with. Am I a motherless daughter? Am I not? Because, what's the criteria? Does she have to be living
Yeah.
for me? And kind of like you mentioned, like, do you still call yourself a wife? Do you
Yeah.
kind of it makes you think of what the criteria is to hold these identities still? Because I do. I'm like, I'm still a daughter. And when my dad passes, I think I'm still going to be a
Yeah.
daughter, right? And,
Yeah.
you know, um, it's there was a lot lost even just as a therapist because I lost my mom to suicide and I was working with suicidality. I was, working with sexual trauma at the time when she passed. That's what I was specializing in. I remember thinking like, "So I can't do this either." Like,
Yeah.
I can't save anybody is kind of where my trauma brain went was, not only could you not save your mom as a daughter, but you can't help your clients
Yeah.
because this is what you right? And so even I thought, "I can't be a therapist anymore, like, I'm gonna have to give this
Wow.
up," because
Yeah.
and obviously now, as
Yeah.
time has moved on and
Yeah.
I've moved through those and, um,
Yeah.
healing some of those beliefs that were fed, I don't believe that's true, but it really rocks. It just hits every bit of it. It hits
Yeah.
every bit of that. Even just identifying as a mom now without my mom, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
what does this mean in terms of motherhood? So, yes, my mom's loss was the first, and so far, maybe hoping, um, my last one for a very long time that truly like changed like how I identified myself. I was very like concrete in those things. And
Yeah.
then when she died in 2018, I like second guessed everything. I wasn't
Yeah.
a mom yet, and I wasn't even partnered yet, so I
Yes.
didn't have
Okay.
those identities at that time either, so I had, if someone said, "Who are you?" I would say a daughter and a sister, and a therapist, and
Yeah.
that's kinda I wasn't at that time, I didn't
Yeah.
identify as a poet, right? So I was
Yeah.
like, I didn't have as much as I've, grown
Grown to
now,
have
so I
now.
felt like I had nothing. Yeah, I was like, "I have
Yeah.
nothing left." Like, like, that's everything.
Yeah.
That sense of purposelessness and everything kind of hit really
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Sarah, there's so much you shared there that I wanna thread through, and then I would love to get a little bit to the story of your mom and what you've learned, but a couple of things you said there was sort of the grappling with your own identity, and even just the ways in which culturally in the lost community, we're identifying ourselves with these different labels like motherless daughters or etcetera. And I just wanna name for all of us, like, whatever the label is for you that feels the most useful to you in that moment is a useful label. So if for like you were saying, I don't know if I want to identify as a motherless daughter because even though her body's still not here, she still feels very much here. So that identity label doesn't fit for you. Great. If that identity label feels useful, meaningful, helps you make sense of yourself in the world, that's great too.
Absolutely.
So just to name that. And then the other thing you
Absolutely.
named, I think, and it comes through again in some of your poetry in your beautiful book, As Waterfall, is a devastating loss, and for you in particular, this a death of your mom by suicide, especially as someone who specializes in this, really brings crashing forth the uncertainty
Oh,
that is
mhm.
really just a part of the human experience that we do so much to uh, pretend is not a part of our daily lives, right? Which, I mean, no diss to all of us that do that, but I do think
Yeah,
that's one of the things that a death loss, an out of order death loss or a tragic death loss or traumatic death loss can bring us front and center to is just the absolute
yeah,
uncertainty, the lack of control, the lack of
mhm.
agency that we have. And what I heard you say was it can like lead us to sort of all or nothing catastrophic thinking. Well,
Absolutely.
if I can't stop this, then I can't stop anything. And what is the point? And then we're nihilists all of a sudden, in the
Yes.
world. So just wanting to name, and I'm so glad to hear that you've sort of come through and around to a different way of understanding, but to normalize the fact that of course you felt that way. Like, how could you not? I have such deep compassion for that version of you who, fell apart in the wake. What do you want to share about your mom, her death, how you grappled with it early? And I asked this question, including whether or not you want to share her name with us, her first name with us, not in a voyeuristic, but as a way for us to normalize talking about hard things. If somebody's listening and they want an audience for their story, to understand and witness what it feels like to be seen in their hard story. So offer the I
Yes.
offer the context for this. We'll be right back with more of this beautiful conversation. Grief is normal and universal, but we all move through it in our own unique ways. In our grief phobic culture, that can leave us feeling lost, overwhelmed, and alone. That's definitely how I felt after my husband died. That's why I wrote my book, Grief is a Sneaky Bitch, an uncensored guide to navigating loss, as a compassionate and practical companion guide. Drawing from years of experience and countless conversations with people who've walked this path, I offer insights and invitations that will help you feel seen, held, and empowered to be in your grief and to move forward with it, not on from it. Whether you're grieving the loss of a loved one, a relationship, a job, or a dream, this book meets you where you're at with honesty, humor, heart, and of course, a judicious use of cussing. It's available now at your local independent bookseller or favorite online bookseller. I personally love bookshop.org. If you'd rather listen because grief brain makes reading feel impossible, and I totally get it, I've got you. I narrated the book myself, and you can find it on Audible. Yeah.
I appreciate that because I know, especially with suicide loss, it's triggering, it's activating for other
Yeah.
people, who've experienced loss, and or it's just, there's stigma around it and all that. So like I
Yeah.
know people don't quite know how much to share, and I try to be very open. Not like you
Yeah.
said, not I'm not just like, here, I need people to know me through my mom and her pain, of course, nothing like that.
Yes.
Um, but I
Yeah.
never want anyone to think I'm ashamed of
Yeah.
how she died, because I'm not, because my mom was the strongest person I've ever known and will ever know.
Uh,
And I empathize with her daily on how like hard she fought to stay alive, just truly stay alive, and then to be present as a mother, for all of us to become adults, and her stay alive that long was truly um incredible.
wow.
Even though it didn't feel like that for her so many of those days, like those
Yeah.
were not, it was great for us because we had this wonderful mom who was still alive, but those days were sometimes, more often than not, pretty awful for her.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
I'm not ashamed of how she died, and,
Yeah.
I think early on, I was a little afraid when people would say, "Oh, your mom died," and I was, "Was she sick?" And yeah, and I didn't really know how to explain, like,
Yeah.
"Oh, yeah, she was sick, but it was also from, like, trauma," right? It wasn't
Yeah.
cancer, it was a different kind of cancer, right? It
Yeah.
was the world hurt her in many ways, and she had,
Yeah.
you know, so much from that, and then, like, the world wasn't safe enough
Yeah.
to stay.
Yeah.
Um, so I've definitely worked through not hiding that. Like, she died by suicide, and that's not a shameful thing, and she fought
Yeah.
very hard, and I don't view it as selfish. So I appreciate you kind of
Yeah.
setting it up to where we can share like that, because yeah, I for a long time I was very defensive and very protective over that. I was always gearing up for someone to say like, "Oh, well, that's not the same. I lost someone, and they wanted to be here." And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, my mom wanted to
That's
be here too so much. And we know that,
yes.
with suicide loss, they
Yes.
don't that's against everything we're wired. We're not wired
Yeah.
to want to die. That's not even
Yes.
what it wasn't about death. It was just wanting the pain to be done
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
truly not seeing another way out after many years of trying other ways,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, she was wonderful. My mom was wonderful, and I mean, she struggled, and it wasn't sunshine and rainbows as a child.
Yeah.
She had struggled with suicidality and mental illness and alcoholism as we were older. It developed a little more. It looked a little
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
But she had, struggled with suicidality my entire life. I had no memories of my mom not struggling with suicide
Mm.
attempts or at least suicidal thoughts. That didn't show up in how she mothered all the time, but it would be here and there. It
Yeah.
could be, once a year. There could be a couple of years that maybe would pass. I never tracked how long it was. I didn't track like relapses or
Yes.
anything
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that, but it
Yeah.
could be multiple times a year where she might have an attempt or just like a really bad episode, and
Mhm.
we would just roll with it and, okay, what do we have to do? What do you need differently this time? And, it was just that was our whole life. So we when she actually died by suicide, it went against almost everything we knew, which was that like mom can't die because like
Yeah.
we almost it was like protective for us. It was like the only way we were able to still live our lives was that like she's immortal, and that
Yes.
became almost like our thing was like she can't die. She would have like she's had all
'Cause
these
she's come
attempts
so
like
many close, in a way it felt maybe
yes.
she's less likely in a way because you
She's
knew
less
there was
likely.
always this, like, bouncing back somehow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was yeah, actually losing her to it. There's no going, "Oh, I guess you can. We'll be more careful next time." Like, it was once
Yeah.
it happened, it was
Yeah.
done, like, it was
Yeah.
permanent, and so
Yeah.
that was people say, like, "Oh, how did her suicidality, like, change you or her suicide attempts?" And I'm like, we buffered around it pretty early on." Like, I was a
Yeah.
functioning kid, I was pretty anxious and things, as you would imagine, but I'm like, my siblings and I were all we went to
Yeah.
college, we did our thing, we're all pretty successful kids, and we just yeah, when she died, we were like, "Oh, wait, I
Yeah.
guess she can die," and we, loved her so much, still love her, and she was
Yeah.
the best and our glue, and so it changed everything. It changed
Yeah.
everything, so much different than how her, like, suicidality and trauma played out as children.
When you were
The
young.
loss of
Yeah.
her was so different.
And
Mhm.
this was 2018. You were a therapist
Mhm.
already. You said
Yep.
not a mom.
Mhm.
So you alluded to this a little, but Um, well, and actually before I go into that, just I heard you say some lovely things about your mom, and I just wanted to pause and bring her into the room and just honor her life too, not just her death. I always want to make space for that too.
Her name was
Um,
Susan, by the I forgot
Susan.
to mention
Okay.
her name.
No,
Her
that's
name's
okay.
Susan, yeah.
So I want to
Yeah.
welcome Susan into the room and just invite that and invite her fighter spirit. It sounds like,
Mhm.
she really
Yes,
fought hard. So
she
just
did.
want to welcome Susan here. Um, so I don't know what age you were, but you were a therapist already. You were young. What,
Mhm.
I've touched on this on the show, both me, you've touched on it actually in some of your poems too. It was like, you can't intellectually, just because you know things and you're good at showing up for other people and practicing things, it doesn't absolve you from having to sink into the pit of despair or feel the overwhelm, all the things.
Yes.
So what did you discover in that early grief about what did and didn't protect you about the fact that you were a therapist already? And,
Yeah, oh my gosh,
you
yeah.
know
Yeah,
yeah.
no, it's great, yeah, I wish this is all the stuff they would talk to us, like, long in the clinical
Yeah.
programs, like, "Hey, if you've done this job because you were" you
Yeah.
know, if this is and I know they do say, "Go to
Yeah.
therapy and do all this stuff,"
Yes.
and I
Yeah,
did,
yeah,
I
yeah.
was very much aware, um, but so much of why I became a therapist was I wanted to help people who were struggling the way my mom was, right?
Yeah.
And I really wanted to work with survivors of domestic violence and sexual trauma. I knew I wanted to be a sex therapist, and particularly wanted to work with women who are trying to like reconnect with that after either their own personal experience with violence or disconnect in some way, or just a macro level. If you grew up in the
Yes.
U.S.,
Yeah.
not a great start, right?
No.
So I knew by 12 I wanted to be a therapist, and I knew by 16 I wanted to be a sex therapist, and I worked on suicide hotlines and crisis hotlines, and dabbled in hospice, and I dabbled in substance use disorder. I mean, I was doing
Yeah.
everything and everything, all of it. And yeah, I just kind of thought like you train in
Yeah.
suicide prevention, right? All your clients are coming in, and every single person has some, right? It's not always high acuity, but everyone has like some level
Yeah.
of suicidality going on just because you're working with sexual trauma. And
Yeah.
I just thought like uh, I got this. I've been helping my mom my entire
Yeah.
life, and now I'm
Yes.
helping clients. And um I was the last person to speak to her, and she still,
Mm.
went through with it within minutes after we spoke. So I kind of thought, well, gosh, you know,
Yeah.
maybe I don't have the right words. Like maybe, kind of you question
Yeah.
everything of like, can I
Yeah.
actually help someone find safety? And it made me really realize that she had autonomy in that. And I know that sounds terrible to so many clinicians where like, well, no, they're not in the right mind. It really brought up this ethical thing for me of like my mom had been overpowered and kind of trapped her entire life, people telling her kind of what she could do, couldn't do, all these things. And she was living in so much pain. And I was like, wow, this was your last statement
Yeah.
of like, I'm making this choice.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know she probably wasn't in the right state. And when she was in different states, she was like, I very much want to live. But that idea of her finding power and like gaining power back in that moment, and obviously the most
Yeah.
tragic, sad way. But as a therapist, I was like, wow, if someone wants to, they will. And that
Yeah.
was really hard for me. I just thought, like, if you've safety planned enough and you
Yeah.
did all the things, and it's
Yeah.
like, wow, I was like, wait, she kind of tricked me. Like, I thought we were okay. Shouldn't
Yeah.
I have seen the signs? I'm like, oh, she really wanted to move through with this plan because she tricked me. Like, I really
Yeah.
thought she was
Yeah.
okay. And then by the time I realized it wasn't, it was too late. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, that part of like, you don't have like the power just because you're the helper,
Yeah.
and you can't, I thought,
Yeah.
well, what was I going to do? Like, put her, you know, try to get her, put away, which is not true.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I
Yes.
can't go and put her somewhere in a padded room for years, because that's exactly what got her here, right? Is
Yeah.
that feeling of
Yeah.
being trapped and having no power. So it opened my eyes to so many things like, wow, if I would have done anything different, I could have
Yeah.
traumatized her more. And
Yeah.
then it was just very
Yeah.
eye opening on how we think we can save people,
Yeah.
and what that even means. And I don't think I saved her from dying, but I think I did save her in so many other ways.
Yeah.
And saving
Yeah.
doesn't always mean like keeping someone alive. And that was hard because I think I did believe that was my job, with
Yeah.
as a daughter and as a therapist.
Yeah. Um, Thank you for sharing so much of kind of your own inner thinking and the dynamic between you and your mom, between you and Susan. And what's coming to mind, I mean, of course, the power of autonomy and agency. I talk about that a lot in my work, in my writing. You do too. I think it's even when it feels uncomfortable for people to hear, like, but that was an agency to do something hard. But I also hear this sort of struggle with your identity, but also maybe coming through to another perspective, which is we can help even when we can't heal
Mm.
or save. I mean, I'm thinking about this conversation I had with Sa earlier this season about like when you're working in hospice, for instance, or you're working alongside somebody who's dying. It's like just because we can't heal or save, and I'm putting this in air quotes in case you're watching on on YouTube, that doesn't mean our help isn't meaningful. And what I hear you saying, both
Absolutely.
with your mom and with your clients, is that, and also I think, and I struggle with this too, as somebody who works with individuals one on one too, some of which who have suicidal ideation, et cetera, is we can get so trapped in a like, if you assume that you actually can stop somebody from doing something or saving them, then it feels too overwhelming, and then you don't like, how do you even show up? Because that's too awesome of a
Yes.
responsibility. And I think about this
Yes.
for those of you who are listening who are not clinicians, by the way, hopefully you haven't tuned out. If you have a friend, a sister, yourself, a cousin, somebody who struggles with, who's either, been given a terminal diagnosis, or who struggles deeply with suicidal ideation. I have a family member who's long time struggling with that. I've had my own bouts with that too, is, um, you can't stop them from doing something that they want, and not but. It still is meaningful to show up and
Mm.
hold space and bear witness. And if you have skills to offer, offer some skills. That both of those things can be true. And that's also, by the way, hard when you're a trained clinician. I mean, I was a clinical director when my husband died, and I thought, like, I should know how to grieve. And I remember just being a total, what I look back then, a mess. And knowing things is not a protective factor.
Absolutely. And it's even like for folks if they're listening, right? If someone's sick, terminally ill, my mom people didn't you see it coming? They're like, "Well, that
Yeah.
probably softened the blow," and I'm like, "Gosh, I wish I
No.
real" right? I'm like, that's the one thing in grief, I'm like, I feel like nothing I won't say
Yeah.
nothing because I know that's very, I don't
Yeah.
wanna do the all or nothing, but, um, there's not as much as we think that, like, softens the blow. Like, my mom
Yeah.
obviously she came close with death multiple times and she would say like Sarah, one day I'm not going to be here and I need you, like, she talked about it, right? Probably
Yeah.
because she was always thinking about it and always thinking about like there might be a time where I'm not here, whether it be in old age or from suicide. Like she was constantly, and I would just be like, oh, I can't, mom, I can't even think about it. I can't even survive the thought of it, let alone survive you actually like dying anything, less than 90
Yeah.
years old. Like I need you my whole life. And
Yeah.
she would try to maybe, I don't know, prep or, she was just like, I'm gonna die, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm lucky, I will die before you, is kind of what she was saying to us as her
Yeah.
children. Like, my greatest wish is to die before you. And I was like,
Mm.
that's fine. Just please be really old, right?
Yeah.
And just be super old. That's all. Like, just give me a long time, right? I just want you to be
Yeah.
so old that the demons die before you and you just get so old that you forget how sad you are. And then we
Yeah.
can just, I can just take care of you and you can just be old and die that way. And that's all I wanted.
Yeah.
And people just say like, yeah, like she was telling you here and there, you got to talk about death with your mom. You came close to it. Like, were you prepared? And I was like, gosh, I wasn't. I was in such
No.
denial. I'll tell you
Yeah.
what, I was
Yeah.
so unprepared. And that just makes it's very difficult to actually um I don't know, soften the
Yeah.
blow of
Yeah.
when they're
Yeah.
actually gone.
Yeah.
Um,
Anticipatory grief does not take the place of grief after the death of somebody.
it does
It's
not.
important and it's meaningful, and we need to give ourselves permission to be present
Yes.
to it. And in your case, I would say it was sort of a combination of anticipatory and ambiguous loss, like this idea that
Yeah.
she's here and not here. And it is not a replacement for what we are grappling with and coming to terms with in the wake of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, death.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
hear you. I'm not going to make you do a minute by minute play, but I hear you sort of like being really obviously wrecked and devastated by her death personally in all the ways, the physical, cognitive, emotional, spiritual, relational ways that
Yeah.
we experience grief, and that there was kind of you know, um, a shift or a rupture in sort of your identity story in your professional life too. Like, how can I show up in this way? When you look back to over that year into 2019, was it poetry? What were some of the things? It's not that because there's an answer, but how did you start to metabolize or
Mm.
digest or process all of that you were holding in those early months and maybe years?
Yes. Poetry was the first thing and will still be the thing that saved me the most
Yeah.
outside of loved ones. So I did have if you knew my mom, you loved her. If you knew me, you knew how much I loved my mom. So my friends who knew her were there
Yeah.
and people that didn't know her knew how much. So I always want to give credit where due.
Yeah.
I had a great support and a lot of people were grieving this woman and
Yeah.
still do. So,
Yeah.
there was not gonna be many people, there weren't gonna be many people who came in and tried to dismiss mine because I was so loud about the love with her that,
Yes.
there was no coming in and quieting me or any of us that were, like, grieving her.
Yes.
So support the community, my small community was very important. I did not access therapy for weeks. I didn't wanna touch it. Even as a
Yeah.
therapist, I was like, "This is one thing, like, I can't do,"
Yeah.
and so I actually waited weeks, and so poetry was, reading and writing, but just Instagram poetry,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
that's what I did while I was alone. I'd either buy books or I'd read, and then when I started reading more grief poetry, I was like, "That saved me." I needed just short little poems.
Yeah.
That's what really started getting it, like, moving and me just, like, figuring out just the whole range. I would go from anger to sad to all the things, and I could there was poetry for all of it, and I got
Mm.
to pick what I was feeling in that minute or that day, and
Yeah.
I couldn't read, like,
A
stuff that
long
was a
book
little
or yeah.
long, or if it was very, yeah, I couldn't do very long books or even some poems if there was too much, like, symbolism and I had to use my brain too much. I'm like, "I don't quite know." I needed,
You're
like,
like,
really
"Grief
simple
brain, I
stuff.
can't. I
Yeah, I
can't."
needed,
Yeah.
like, brief quotes and, like, simple poems, and then, therapy did end up helping. That was therapy's great. It gave me my space to sit with someone who didn't know my mom, right? And didn't
Yes.
love her, and
Yeah.
that was needed because I did need to move through. There was a trauma component there that I needed to address
Yeah.
too. This wasn't just, it wasn't
Yeah.
just the grief. It was the trauma of how it all happened, and to trust myself again and know that it wasn't my fault, and
Yeah.
to release some of that guilt and shame and all of that. Um, and that really started moving it through, and then, yeah, I stopped my job and I opened up a private practice within a few months once I knew I was actually, like, okay. I wasn't
Yeah.
gonna just jump right back in, that didn't feel ethical, but
Yeah.
the day I rented an office was also the day I went on, like, my first date with my now husband, and that was
Oh,
all, and, it was all in the same time that I just was just extra surrounded by love in this new professional endeavor, and I got to actually focus on sex therapy. Um, and it wasn't like a turnaround because I was still
yeah.
very much grieving, obviously, very heavily
Yes.
grieving in 2019, but it was like a whole new meaning
Yeah.
happened, like, everything just changed where, it felt like my mom did it, where it was almost like,
Yeah.
here's everything, right, that was sitting on the other side of this pain, and here's all this stuff. You're gonna grieve still, but here's
Yeah.
this, like, wonderful life, and it just, like, gave me hope again, like, "Oh, I can run a practice, and I
Yeah.
can still be a therapist, and I am worthy of love, and I can be there are
Yeah.
good people out here that are as good as my mom," and, my now husband being one of those people, and yeah, it just a lot happened that following year.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that helped. That created space. I found people who let me talk about her, and, you know, I started dating someone who, like, I was having nightmares all the time, right? And he
Yeah.
was right there, and, my friends stayed with me, and
Yeah.
slowly but surely, right, it started kind of digesting and working through, and it looks very different now. Almost, it'll be 8 years this summer. It looks just very different now than it did in
Yes.
those first couple years, right?
We'll be right back with more of this beautiful conversation. More than ever, my friends, I'm passionate about creating meaningful community and offering you more insight into my work and even into my life, too. I want a place to explore topics in depth, expand my creative expressions through things like long form essays and even maybe some audio and video guided practices. I want to be able to share some behind the scenes moments from the podcast and maybe even eventually host a Dear Lisa column. Most importantly, I want to build an authentic, interactive community off social media. Life is happening so fast, and I want a place where we can slow down, dive deeper, and figure out how to metabolize it all together. And I'd love to have you join me. That's why I launched my Substack, AFGO with Lisa Keefauver. Now, if you haven't heard me talk about it in my book or from the stage, or maybe even here on the podcast, AFGO stands for Another Fucking Growth Opportunity. Yes, of course, I had to get in a judicious use of cussing. Rest assured, my friends, like in all my work, I'll show up authentically, offer thoughtful, meaningful, and practical guidance on how to center aliveness in a world full of loss. I really look forward to your comments, our chats, creating special audio and video content for you, and more. And if you'd like things delivered to your inbox, don't worry, AFGO with Lisa Keefauver will come directly to you. You can sign up after today's episode at afgowithlisakefauver.substack.com. You can find it in the show notes, or if that's all too much, just head to my website, lisakeefauver.com. Yeah, yeah. I try to bring that up often on this show because I have listeners, of course, who are listening, having just experienced loss, having
Yes.
experienced it decades ago, is that while you will carry your grief over a profound loss for the rest of your life, it will not look or feel the same, that it does change and metabolize just like our emotions move. No emotion lasts forever. Damn it. I wish joy could just hang
I was
around, but
gonna
it
say.
doesn't. But neither does
Oh,
the deep despair that we feel in early grief. And part of how it changes and moves is, to your point, how we work with it. Sometimes that looks
yes.
like therapy. Sometimes that looks like community. Sometimes that looks like moving your body. Sometimes that looks like acts of service,
Yes.
some combination of that. But it does change, and it changes shape. And also, we change our capacity to hold the weight of it, and also to allow it to inform us and teach us how to be in life too. I mean, I feel like that really comes through in your poetry too. There's the like both and of the deep fear and the sorrow and sometimes the anger and even despair at sometimes over loss, over your mom not physically being present here, and what a teacher you're allowing grief and her death to be too. So sort of that both and.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest things. I was like, I couldn't take all the, I couldn't be with only, like, the rainbows and butterflies, and
Yeah.
even if anyone's listening, like, I totally get it if you hear someone say, "It gets better," and I remember saying, like, "Don't tell me
Yeah.
that." I'm sure you experienced
Exactly.
where I'm like,
Oh,
"Don't
I was
tell me
like,
this will
oh,
get better,"
it's
right?
my show, so I'm gonna say it. I was like, fuck you, it gets better.
That's
And
what
also,
yes! Oh
I
my
don't want it
god.
to get better because this is my person and he died, and what a
Yes.
betrayal that would be, or yeah, so agree.
Yes.
If you're hearing
Agree
this and you're
and
like, I don't want to hear it, I get you.
I feel it. I almost was like, instead of people saying it's almost like instead of a "Just wait,
Yeah.
it'll be like this," I remember just being like, "Just let me figure it out, like, let me
Yes.
get there and see what that looks like." I don't wanna hear it like, that part
Yeah.
gets but I to know that there's hope and it's not like you'll never eat again, but also not
Yes.
so much hope as in, like, it'll be like they never existed. And that was so hard to
Exactly.
capture with,
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
my poor therapist. I was probably like, "Don't say it that way. Don't say
Yeah.
it that way." Like, there was probably no way to say it to me
Yeah.
that made me feel like it honored what was happening, and that's kind of it. I'm like, "You're right." Like, that is what grief work is. It's really, there are just no words sometimes,
Yes. Yeah.
and you just have to, like, be with people through it. Because 'cause I'm
You
like,
just have to be in the silence of it. But and it's
yeah,
also though why I love poetry, and you as you mentioned, many of your poems are very, succinct but small. They're I don't want to say short because that's I think we have a
they kinda are. I mean, they're,
attitude, but
it's
they're
a few
yeah, they're short and
lines.
sweet.
Yeah.
But I think it's why I love poetry so much, and it has been a savior to me again, as folks know, both as a writer, a reader of poetry, a longtime reader of poetry, but also a writer. And poetry and metaphor is when you don't have the words for a cohesive sentence, for something that you're going to say back to a friend as reassurance or as a therapist. I think sometimes poetry, the truth told slant, as they say, is this way at helping us see or feel or experience the indescribable or the inexplicable.
Yes.
in a way that nothing
Yes.
else I mean, I think music can transport us that way too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Movement and dance can, but I think poetry is a profound source for that. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's something about poetry, I'm like, I don't feel like I just read poetry, I feel like I I feel it, I eat it, I smell
Yes.
it, I taste it, like, there's some when people use and I'm not, like, the best at metaphors, like, some people I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I swear I
Yeah.
can taste this, I can taste what they're
Yes.
saying," right? When they
Yes.
use the imagery and the metaphor and all these things, I'm like, it just sits different
Yeah.
than, something else, and I love a
Uh,
textbook, I love nerding out on the science behind it and all that, but when I'm really trying to, like, feel it or taste it, yeah, eat it,
yeah.
smell it, all of that, there's something about poetry that just it moves it, and that's not for everyone, right? You gotta kind of
Yeah.
find your thing, but there's something, like, somatic about it,
Oh, I was just about to use
and I
that
love
word.
that.
It's so somatic, and there's so many different styles of poetry, and so as a reader, by the way, you can go find your home and whatever feels resonant, but, poetry is deeply somatic, both as a reader and a writer. I've been
Yes.
on a tear writing a lot of poetry lately in the wake of, sort of the reckoning and recognition of surviving my own cancer, and also having a lot of old, sexual assault trauma be unearthed in the wake of this cultural moment.
Mhm.
And the somatic experiencing and processing and holding of writing right now feels, I mean, love my therapist, but like it feels so much more profound and powerful. Can I read to you? How would you feel if I read to you one of your poems? Because there's one that's coming to mind that feels resonant to this particular part of our conversation.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'd love it. I love when
Yeah.
people read it because it's I get to experience it the other way, and I love that.
Yes. And I wish I maybe would have practiced it more. So I hope I do the poem honor. But this is what Sarah has to offer. I don't know how much time I have with anyone, and that uncertainty turns stepping stones into eggshells. I wish I could love without fear like before I spent my last day with someone and didn't know it until they were gone. But maybe the way I showed them love was enough, not forced, not fueled by fear. I just loved them because they deserved it. That is how I want to love the ones who I can still hold in my arms. After a flower died in my garden, the sky acted no differently. The sun and the rain still drenched the dead flower long after it disappeared deep into the mud and out of sight, as though the sky never doubted that its love would still be felt. That is how I want to love the ones who I cannot see anymore. Yeah, that's, yeah.
I know I'm doing a lot of head nodding, but
I'm
that's
doing a lot of head nodding. I know it's a
yeah.
podcast, y'all, but
But
I want you listen. I imagine our listeners are head nodding and maybe tearing up too.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's something about the the certainty of coming to grips with the certainty of all things dying,
Mm,
and also the preciousness that death teaches us if we let it. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And that's what I hear in that poem. What um what do you know 8 years on about that? Because I know that lesson for me felt and feels very, um, I don't wanna use the word easy to access, but feels very accessible
Yeah.
in a new loss. After the death of my husband, a few years later, after the death of, my friend Joe, even just coming to grips in the wake um, surviving cancer, in 2024, and as time goes on, sometimes the lesson shifts or how it shows up in our life. So that was a long-winded way of asking, almost 8 years on since your mother's death. How does something like this poem live in your day-to-day life in terms of
Mm,
being present to the preciousness and loving the ones?
yes. I think it captures that I don't just wanna love things because I can lose them, and so I wanna say when I wrote that,
Yeah.
I think it was after I had read something about, and we hear this all the time, like, love someone, show your love like it's their last day on earth, and I'm like, "Gosh, I'm so sick of loving like that all
Yes.
the time,
Yeah.
fueled by fear and constantly waiting for them to be gone the next day," and I'm like, "I loved people who are not here in the most natural way, and it wasn't supposed to be any different," right? And in that poem, it wasn't
Yes.
fueled by fear. I wasn't walking on eggshells. I was just being me and them
Yeah.
and loving them because that's exactly what they were worthy of and deserving of, and that's how I wanna love people and be with people today. I don't want it to be because you might die. I want it to be because
Yes.
you're alive and you deserve that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then the other lesson is, and if you are not here where I cannot love you in that way and see that you've received it, I still wanna love you the way the sun still
I
loves the
mean,
dead flower in the mud.
I just loved
And I
that
remember
line.
I had looked outside and I think I was looking outside and I think I had accidentally ripped up a flower or something had
Yeah.
happened, and I just like, it was raining on it and the sun was out, and I'm like, "Oh, it doesn't know it's dead. It doesn't
Yeah.
know this flower's dead. It's like doing, it's doing this. It doesn't know it's even dead." And I remember just being
Yeah.
like, "Wait,
Yeah.
that's something right there, right?" Like it just still, right? It's just like pouring love, and it didn't matter if it was dead. It still was like, I'm still gonna do all these, and like I was like, that's how I wanna love the people that are not physically here, the things
Yeah.
that are not physically here. I wanna just keep pouring love and hope they feel it somehow wherever they are.
Yeah.
And so that poem was like 2 big
Yeah.
lessons
Yeah.
that I did not have access to early on. That
Yes.
was written more recent, and 2019 me couldn't have, I don't even know if I could have read that maybe. I don't know if I would have read that and been like, "I don't know what this means," or that was
Yes.
one that it took me a minute to get there because at that time I was still just loving out of fear. I was
Yeah.
loving not even like me anymore. I was just loving because I wanted to make sure I didn't regret how
Yeah.
I was, if
Yeah.
they died the next day, and I don't wanna do that. I don't wanna live like that, like I'm just trying to avoid regret because A, we never will,
Yeah.
and B, that's not loving someone because they deserve it, that's loving so you can avoid
Yeah.
regret, and I don't wanna do that anymore, and I think trauma and grief had me doing that for, a long time
Yeah.
in a very heavy way.
Yeah. Oh, Sarah, I really appreciate, well, so much of what you said there, including maybe the 2019 version of you could not have accessed that either as the writer of it or even the reader of it. And again, just to those of you who, if this doesn't land now, you'll come back to it in her gorgeous book as a waterfall another time. But also, I agree that I think the intention of that sort of phrase of love everybody or love your life as if it's your last day. Um, I'm not going to get into dissecting the words or the intentions there. And I think when we are living from, which for those of us who've survived trauma, I certainly have multiple times, um, is a kind of controlling. It's not a pure love, it's not an authentic love, it's loving, it's a kind of hypervigilance, to, avoid a pain, and if that's what you have to give today, and I've definitely been there too, there were very
Me
many
too,
versions of me where
I
so
get
this
it.
is not a judgment, this is like, if that's where you are and need to be in any given moment, let yourself have compassion for that version of you, yes,
It's
and
survival.
it's
I did that for a
survival.
long time to
Yeah.
survive, and I honor that so much.
Yeah. And I appreciate this version of you who is now understanding, um, how to be present to that love in a way that is an authentic expression of you and not driven so much of the other shoe dropping, right? Or of the fear that's coming from that place. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I do want to, there's another poem that you wrote, that I thought I might read as well. And it touches on some of the themes that we've ended up talking about today, which is kind of, for the early griever who's not ready for what we just read, or even some of the conversations
Yeah.
we had about, you know, appreciate how death can be a teacher to appreciate life and all the sort of things that death doulas say, all that kind of like higher
Yeah.
level is what does it feel like where you when you're in the dark, when you're feeling the depth of
Yes.
despair and what did you tell yourself or what might we tell ourselves in that place? I'm going to read it and then I just love to hear what went into that poem and what's your relationship with those words now? Yeah.
Perfect.
You said some losses will make you question every bite of food, every sip of water. What's the point? Just let me go. This is the darkest place of grief that those around you might be too afraid to look. This is the monster under the bed, the one that no one knows how to fight. I swear it has at least 1,000 teeth and is made of quicksand and splinters, but I've killed it more than once. And every time my weapon was this. If their life meant this much to me, surely my life means something too.
Mm.
Yeah.
I haven't had that one read out loud,
Mm.
and so I feel it in my chest pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's um, this is for anyone, whether you're grieving, you know, you're grieving something. I think if you ever get into this place of darkness, you're grieving whether it's a person or
Yeah.
safety or
Yeah.
belonging or um, agency, any of that. So whatever you're grieving, but I wrote this because I have been there. I have, especially in
Yeah.
early loss. I remember saying like, just let me die. Just please,
Yeah.
just that's it. Just let me be with her. And I don't
Yeah.
need to eat and I don't need to drink. And I remember just, it was
Yeah.
that. And people did not know what to do with that. And of course, right?
Yeah.
That's terrifying for people to hear. It's hard to fathom, right? I just I and I so I hid it a lot, right? I was a
Yeah.
therapist. I was this, my mom just died by suicide. You can't talk like that. You can't think like that. So I just held a lot of that in
Yeah.
and tried to take that on myself. And that is what I would always come back to. Like, wait
Yeah.
a second, you are, this one particularly with death loss. I was like, you're grieving this
Yeah.
life so much. It meant so much to you.
Yeah.
Yours must mean
Yeah.
something, right? Like there has to be purpose. Purpose doesn't mean it needs to be books or, saving people or doing some grand things. But I'm like, if her life, in this case, my
Yeah.
mom, if her life meant so much, mine has to mean something, right? Because the grief and the trauma just convinced me so many times that like there was no point of me if my mom wasn't alive. No one would love me the way my mom would love me.
Yeah.
She was, you know, my number one. And so that's pretty cognitive. And I know not
Yes.
everyone can go that cognitive. And that had to, it wasn't always just me thinking it. I had to do things that showed that I was worthy of living. And I had to
Mm.
um, do things, right? That said, like, you're alive and you deserve to be and your life has meaning. It wasn't always just kind of repeating these soothing statements to myself,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that was written because I don't want my poetry to not talk about
The
that the
hard
secondary
truth.
parts, the hard truth. Like we do, like people
Yeah.
will die or things will die in your life and you will question, right?
Yeah.
Many of us question like why go on.
Yeah.
And I find it very important to speak to that. Just,
Yes.
because I think that is a monster that a lot of people don't know what to do with, and they
Yeah.
don't know how to talk about it with other people,
Yeah. Well, that's why I
especially
pulled it
after
out. Yeah.
death loss.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I really
Well, especially after
appreciate.
death loss, and I can imagine especially after death by suicide loss too,
Yeah,
because people are already heightened to this idea that people were wanting to escape the pain by dying by
yeah,
suicide. Yeah. Yeah.
yes,
I definitely said many times, I don't want to be here. I don't know how I can be here. And that was not the same as me willfully wanting to end my life. Those are two very different things. It was, I
yes.
really didn't understand how I was going to live, So I think
Mhm.
that's one of the reasons that that poem resonated for me. But you named something there, and I can't believe we're already coming to the end of our time together. But I thought you named something there that if you're willing to share what that might have looked like, I think could be helpful for folks. And that was the sort of the doing something. A lot of times we have the
Mhm.
mantras, and I'm a big believer in mantra. I talk out loud all
Yeah.
the time to myself. I talk out loud to my late husband, by the way, daily. Talk to
Yeah.
my dog. Um, so I believe in the power of words and having a particular mantra, and if that particular sort of, mantra at the end of your poem, "Surely my life means something too," is useful to you, dear listener, then please take it. And how do we start close in, as poet David White, invites us, would start close in. So
Yeah.
what did doing something to show yourself your life was meaningful to, or that, that your life means something to? What small actions, small steps, what did the embodied somatic version of
Mhm.
that look like for you, maybe, if you're willing to share?
Yes. Writing poetry was the most connecting to, like, the whole point of, I think, being alive is being able to embrace art and
Yeah.
feel, and something about writing poetry felt very alive, and, like, no one had to read it, and yet, like, I get
Yeah.
to do this and I get to create after losing, and something again, that's something about that was just, and then beginning to share it. I know that feels really big, and that doesn't feel small for a lot of people, but I didn't have a large audience. I didn't intend
Yeah.
to ever have a large audience, like, but just even sharing it in the community, sharing in social media, sharing it with, people I loved or friends, sharing that felt like something, like, I get to connect with one person who might know what this feels like in grief, or connect with someone who's also missing their mom or experienced death loss, and again, really, I'm very relational, so
Yes.
that did give me, like, that gave me purpose, that gave me meaning, knowing, like, "Oh, we're all gonna grieve at some point, like, let's do it
Yeah.
together, like, let's not be alone." But sometimes it was just, like, moving around and being like, "My body's alive, it gets to be here," I had to learn over time to kind of be my own cheerleader and love myself the way my mom loved me, right?
Yeah.
And she just thought I was amazing just by, like, breathing, so sometimes I would just be, like, breathing and a
Yeah.
meditation or something and be like, "This is cool," because that's how my mom viewed it, like, this was just so cool I was existing in the world, because that's how, I was
Yeah.
lucky enough to have a mom that loved like that. And so sometimes it would just be that, like, I'm breathing and I am still here, and this is
Yeah.
I'm feeding the trees, and it wasn't always about having to do things for other people, but
Yes.
I do find purpose in that, as we know, as therapists, and
Yes.
sharing my poetry. There's something about connecting with others and helping others that have always given me a sense of purpose. So those were like mine. Those were my big ones
Yeah.
of, like, look, I'm breathing and I'm feeding the trees and they're feeding me, and, moving
Yeah.
around because my body still deserved movement, and my mom made me and she grew me for 9 months. And so I kind of use language of, like, how my mom loved me, and maybe other people hearing this, like, thinking about how their person loved you. That was
Yeah.
really helpful for me to, like, channel that and, like, kind of create my own love for myself, that own, like, unconditional love for myself. So sometimes it would just be like, she'd want you to drink this water, she'd
Yeah.
want you to eat this, right? She'd want you to laugh again, and she's okay with your crying. And, like, I had to visualize a lot of that and then internalize kind of like, what does that sound like coming from my own voice and not only hers?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and just kind of be like, it's so cool to be alive, even though I didn't
Yeah.
feel that, but I know she would feel that.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, I wasn't, I didn't access yoga like how some, they
Yeah.
jump into movement, and I was very weak, and just, like, just physically, I felt very weak, and that wasn't quite where but
Yeah.
poetry. So even though that is a mixture of intellectual, there was something just very, gosh, there was just the somatic piece behind it, and the writing, it just, when I began sharing that, it, like, opened my world to this larger community, and that it just feels like purpose. I'm like,
Yeah.
it never needed to be my career, it's still not my career, and
Yeah.
my career is helping people just in a different way,
Yeah.
um, but that, I'm like, I can't quite describe how much that changed it for me. People
Yeah.
don't have to write poetry
No.
and share it and
No.
get an audience or write books or anything like that, but my gosh, yeah, it was for me, and
Yeah.
I had no idea. I did never thought in a million years would I have put out books, and then when she passed, I was like, I'm gonna publish some books.
Yeah.
We're gonna make books, and people are gonna read them, and
Yeah.
I guess, who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I so appreciate thanks for sharing the different kinds of ways you tried out, being in this world, and tending to your grief, and that's really I think I wanna close our conversation with that to the listeners and is the sort of invitational language you offered, which is sort of the crux of my work, is that there isn't one way, and there isn't gonna be a magic activity that you do. It's gonna be little by little, as poet Rosemary Watola Trommer said in our conversation earlier season, like, it's like teaspoon by teaspoon, right?
Mm,
Or poem by poem, or acts of service by acts of service, or beauty walks, or whatever is your things, um, is just the trying, the sort of doing, the seeing what happens. And I think in all of the practices that you just shared, and I tried to share here on the show and in my work with individuals, is um, they're all just different forms of learning to be with what is.
mhm. Yeah.
The felt sense, the intellectual sense, the emotional sense, and learning to be develop a relationship with ourselves, to trust ourselves that we have the capacity to be with what is. And we don't have to do it alone. So I love this your reminder of reaching out, sharing vulnerably, whatever that looks like for you, is also a way to be carried and help yourself carry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. Yes, that.
Yeah.
Exactly all of that. Thank
um,
you.
Sarah, thank you so much for being with us today, for sharing about Susan, for sharing about your dog Sebastian, for the honesty that you brought us about the complexity and of loving someone who dies by suicide, about um, what it means to show up in the world, creating in service of for yourself, in service for other people. Just been a true delight to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much. This was all these conversations. This is my thing. Like I said, I love connecting and just having the space to connect over something so innate and so deep. And so thank you
Yeah,
so much for having me. This was wonderful.
thank you. I so appreciate Sarah's honesty, her compassion, and the way she so honestly explored the depths of our human experience of grieving, particularly the death of someone who we loved who died by suicide. Her extraordinary book, As a Waterfall, along with all of her other gorgeous books of poetry, will be linked in the show notes for today's episode. Now, if you learned something new today, felt seen or acknowledged in your own grief, or at least feel more equipped to show up for someone grieving the death of their loved one, I'd so appreciate it if you took just a few minutes to head to the Grief is a Sneaky Bitch show page on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star rating, and then take a few moments to write a review about what the show means to you. Until next time, my friends, I see you, I hear you, and I'm holding you in my heart.